So thank you, everybody. So this is a class on Nagarjuna. And how many of you were able to read any part of it? Great. Okay. How many of you just read the text without the commentary?
Well, I read some of the commentary.
Okay. How many of you were able to read part of the commentary? Well, this is wonderful. This is great because this is non-trivial stuff, right? You know. All right. So,
It's why
so
no man attend.
Yeah.
So Nagarjuna is he's kind of amazing. So when you read the text, it can read as an extremely abstract philosophical text, and what the hell is this about? But what it's pointing to, he's always pointing to awakening, and what he's writing is coming out of intimate practice. So that's how it goes. And what I like about Garfield's commentary is Garfield, while he definitely gets into the philosophical weeds, he's always bringing it back to that in a way that the other commentaries tend not to as much. If you're interested in English, we have Garfield, this one here, and then we have Sideris and Katsura. And I think Katsura is a Zen practitioner, and Inada definitely is a Zen practitioner, but this doesn't have much commentary. It's simply the translation. So let me start with a sort of broad outline, and then I'll bring it back to Zen practice. The goal of the text, Garfield states it very clearly, is the extirpation of the root of suffering. So this abstract philosophical stuff about existence and absolute and relative and universal and conventional, this stuff that sounds very abstract, ontological discussions, in fact, we're talking about it because it's our mistaken beliefs in that cause us suffering. So this is aimed at the extirpation of the root of suffering. And the structure, chapters 1 through 7 talk about external phenomena. Chapters 8 through 13 talk about the experience of the subject, and does either the experience or the subject, does it have inherent existence, where inherent existence means unchanging. Chapters 14 through 21 are about the fundamental structure of conventional reality, and chapters 22 through 26 are about ultimate truth and its relation to the conventional. And this is Garfield's analysis, I'm just saying it. It's important reading the text to know that there's two, they're usually called the opponents. I think of them as interlocutors. And there's actually probably more than two, but they fall into two classes. One is the reificationist, the one who makes everything real, sees existence as inherent existence, and properties are inherently existing. The realist says these are real, and then the nihilist says nothing's real. Everything's not empty, everything's nothing. Nothing exists. So that's, and then I sent you a long list of the particular verses where it's the interlocutor speaking instead of Nagarjuna speaking. The main focus of the document, it's easy to lose sight of it, is the true truths, in Garfield's translations, conventional truth and ultimate truth, and more commonly they're called the relative and the absolute. So conventional truth is, let's see, I'm wearing glasses, and Liz is wearing glasses, and Blake is wearing glasses, and Vera's wearing glasses, and Jane's wearing glasses, and Jennifer is wearing glasses, and Charlie and Zemek are not wearing glasses. That's conventional truth. Okay. And then the conclusions of the document, and again, I'm quoting other people, Sideritz expresses it as the ultimate truth is that there is no ultimate truth. Garfield expresses it as inherent existence is an incoherent notion. And Garfield is very fond of this word incoherent. And what incoherent means, it doesn't make sense. That's what it means. And then also none of the phenomena, conditions, motions, sense, aggregates discussed make sense in the context of inherent existence. So if you believe in inherent existence, then this world doesn't work. You just have a bunch of billiard balls bouncing against each other and not affecting each other. Also, only in the context of emptiness, what might appear to be the greatest threat to meaningfulness, can a meaningful life be understood. And what is this emptiness? Well, it's not an essence, it's not a thing, it is the total lack of essence. It's not an object of any kind, including an object of awareness. So you can't say, we have nouns, and we think that nouns necessarily define things. But emptiness, that's just our using language to reify things, to make things real, to say that things exist. Emptiness is not a thing. It's not, when I was a kid, we were taught a noun is a person, place, or thing, which is ridiculous because a noun is a word. But, and we PhD in English, you're smiling. But yeah, so if we think in terms of things, then that's incoherent. So emptiness is not an object of any kind. And Garfield has this wonderful quote about nirvana. It's a way of being. Nirvana is not a thing. It's a way of being, a way of perceiving the world, a way of acting in the world. So that's sort of rough conclusions. And then side notes, in chapter 3, the examination of the senses, if you look at that is refuting the Abhidharma's analysis of sensation. Sense faculties, sense organs, subjects of sensory experience, sense objects, none exist independently. They only make sense as an interdependent process. So this is very similar to the Heart Sutra. The Heart Sutra also negates much of the Abhidharma. And then also, in case you're wondering, even though there's a lot of talk about rebirth, there's no one to be reborn. There's no marble that gets passed to Judy from her former life and from Judy in her future life. So that's a sort of rough description of the text. And I'm going to go over it in a different form in a minute. So let's talk a little bit of Nagarjuna. He lived in South India, 1st or 2nd century CE, and it's very interesting that we don't know exactly when he lived. Major figure in Buddhism. He's the guy that brought the Prajnaparamita Sutras back from the Naga kingdom. That's why he's called Nagarjuna, which means Naga man. My article in Buddha Dharma, I wanted to call it Naga Man Goes to China, but they had this horrible title because I'm a mathematician. Anyway, we know almost nothing about him, that he lived either 1st or 2nd century Buddhist monk. He first practiced Hinayana Buddhism or Theravada Buddhism and then converted to Mahayana Buddhism. And that's all we know. And then there were all these legends, bringing the sutras back and so on and so forth. His iconography, he's often pictured like floating on a cloud or something like that. But his influence is absolutely vast. Extensive commentaries on the Prajnaparamita Sutras. His commentaries are why they're central to Mahayana Buddhism and why so many Mahayana Buddhists regularly chant the Heart Sutra. His climactic work is the one that you read, the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, the Fundamental Verses of the Middle Way, which is the foundation of Madhyamika or Middle Path Buddhism. And as you know, middle path does not mean not too hot, not too cold. It means this is false and this is not is false. And I'll probably talk more about that in a minute. Essentially, every Mahayana school is rooted in some aspect of his work. So you have the Madhyamika and the Yogacara. These are the two great schools, mind only and middle path. And they contain elements of each other, but these are the two great schools, and they both have tremendous influence on all of Mahayana Buddhism. Nagarjuna is incorporated into Zen. He's supposedly the 14th Zen ancestor, which of course our lineage chart is in many ways bogus until you get to about the, I don't know, 6th or 7th centuries. It's kind of bogus, but he's put in there as the 14th Zen ancestor because he's so important to Zen Buddhism, and he's regarded as a saint in Tibetan Vajrayana Buddhism. He not only wrote dense philosophical works, but he also wrote popular works. He wrote works for, rulers, leaders, kings, whatever. He also wrote works for lay people. And he's a local hero, like Huineng in South China. Even though India is not a Buddhist country, in fact, there are very few Buddhists left in India, there's a 20th century dam in South India named after him, and the main training school for contemporary Indian Dalit Buddhists is named after him. So he's kind of a local hero. So now I'm going to summarize the Mula Madhyamaka Karika. In my notes it says in 4 tweets. And tweet 1, everything is empty. Do I have to say X? No. So tweet 1, everything is empty, including emptiness. Tweet 2, the phenomenal relative conventional world consists solely of relationship, dependent co-origination, not between things. It's this flux. That's what the conventional world is made of. The nominal, absolute, ultimate world turns out to be the phenomenal, relative, conventional world, seen correctly. If you see the relative correctly, you are seeing the absolute. It's not that the absolute is somewhere else. You have to go there. It is your goal. It's that right here, right now. But really seeing it correctly. If you think it's a thing, then you're lost. Okay? So everything is action, everything is relationship, everything is interdependent, everything is fluid. In some ways, there's an incredible lightness to this. It's like everything becomes light and air, Nothing is heavy, everything's light, which is not saying there isn't suffering. There is suffering, but still everything is light. And finally, the 4th tweet, nirvana equals samsara, which is not the same as point C, because nirvana and samsara are states of being. So nirvana and samsara are also the same. The method consists of, let's see, we have the 4 propositions and the 100 negations, which occurs in, is referred to in some koan. So let's talk about the 4 propositions. I should stop for a second. Does anyone have any questions so far? Good, because I have a lot of material. Oh, Jennifer, what?
You can actually answer it later, or it may be just a no. The other things he wrote for rulers and lay people, are those actually available for people?
They're very hard to find. There are some of his texts that are available in English, but they're very hard to find. I have another one somewhere. I was looking for it the other day and I couldn't find it. But it's usually the Mula Madhyamaka Karika that's easily available. There is a text that he wrote for some king that people refer to a lot, and so that might be more easily available. If you look in the bibliography of Garfield's translation, you can just Google and see what's available. Okay, yeah.
It's called Letter to a Friend. That text for that is it's very valuable actually.
It is available. Great. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, like
Yeah. Yeah, the one I have is a different one. It's more theoretical, my other text. The 4 propositions. Form A, and you don't have to take notes if you want, I'll just send you my notes. X exists, X does not exist, X neither exists nor does not exist, X both exists and does not exist. Now, I want to make a technical statement that in Western logic 3 and 4 are equivalent, but ancient Indian logic was more sophisticated. For those inclined to technical philosophy, Western logic is extensional, that is about objects, and Indian logic is intentional, that is, it's about meaning. So that makes these two subtly different. Anyway, so you have that. And then form B, X is Y, Y is X. X is not Y, Y is not X, no Y, X is X, Y is Y, and parts of this are often used in formal Dharma talks in our school. Now, not everybody likes algebra, so let me make these a little more down to earth. This is a water bottle. This is not a water bottle. This is neither nor not a water bottle. This is both a water bottle and not a water bottle. That's form A. Form B, form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. Form is not emptiness. Emptiness is not form. No emptiness. Form is form. Emptiness is emptiness. So that's okay. And then there are other forms of the tetralemma as well. 4 propositions tetralemma. And Nagarjuna did not invent the tetralemma. It existed for hundreds or maybe 1,000 years before him in Indian philosophy is incredibly sophisticated. Indian logic is very sophisticated. But anyway, the main point, Nagarjuna's main point, is that to assert any of these propositions is to fall into error. So, relevant quotes from Mula Madhyamaka Karika. Empty should not be asserted, non-empty should not be asserted, neither both nor either should be asserted, they are only used nominally, that is, conventionally. And an unusual positive quote, because as you know, a lot of his stuff is sort of in terms of negation. Everything is real and is not real, both real and not real, neither real nor not real. This is Lord Buddha's teaching. So that's the tetralemma. And now let's explicate the 4 tweets. So empty means empty of essence, substance, self, nature. The philosophical stance called essentialism is false. There is no essential Blake. There is no essential Judy. There is no essential water bottle. And reification, taking a word and assuming that it must refer to a thing, reification is incorrect. Now, point A does not mean that nothing exists. It is not nihilism. It's in fact the opposite of nihilism. It's saying that there's this tremendous flux back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. By point A, the absolute is impossible outside the relative. And nirvana means seeing things as they are, not out there, as I've already said, not out there, somewhere away from conventional reality. And this is why Nagarjuna's approach is called the middle way. It's the middle way between essentialism and nihilism. You don't have to pick one. It's the middle way between them. And let's see. Yeah, I guess I have time for a few relevant quotes. Let's see, for A and B, that's about emptiness. Okay, those who see essence and essential difference and entities and non-entities, they do not see the truth taught by the Buddha. To say it is to grasp for permanence. To say it is not, it is to adopt the view of nihilism. Therefore, a wise person does not say exists or does not exist. And then for the absolute and relative being identified, The Buddha's teaching of the Dharma is based on two truths, a truth of worldly convention and an ultimate truth. Those who do not understand the distinction drawn between these truths do not understand the Buddha's profound truth. Without a foundation in the conventional truth, the significance of the ultimate cannot be taught. Without understanding the significance of the ultimate, liberation is not achieved. And then for nirvana and samsara, there is not the slightest difference between cyclic existence and nirvana. There is not the slightest difference between nirvana and cyclic existence. And I think the most important that sort of encompasses all of this is relinquishing views. To assert any proposition as an absolute truth is to fall into error. Or as the last stanza of the Mula Madhyamaka Karika puts it, I prostrate to Gautama, who through compassion taught the true doctrine which leads to the relinquishing of all views. So in the Eightfold Path, the first is correct view. Correct view is no view. So if you know the notion of standpoint philosophy, where standpoint says that each observer has a standpoint from which they see, there is no correct standpoint, there is no incorrect standpoint. You relinquish all views. I mean, yes, temporarily you have to have them. That's the relative, that's the world we live in, the conventional world. Yeah, you're gonna, if you're in America, you're either gonna vote or not vote, and you're either gonna vote for Trump or Harris or some third party candidate, right? You have, that's the relative, the relative, the conventional world. But hold this lightly, always hold it lightly. Now I want to talk about Nagarjuna and Zen. So, first I should ask, are there any questions? Yeah.
Okay, so, and this always trips me up on the no view. I mean, I understand what you're saying, although at some point, shaking a baby is wrong. You
Right.
should shake the baby.
Yeah, don't shake the baby, yeah.
And so that is a view. And there's no good that comes from shaking a baby. It just
So
doesn't.
that's not a view. The view is when you see the baby and you become outraged and you pick up the baby and you shake it. That's the view. And then if you're walking by and you see this happening, to say don't shake the baby is not a view, it's not a judgment, it's a statement of conventional truth. If you shake a baby, you're going to hurt it, right? So the view is not don't shake the baby. The view is in that moment, is your mind so distorted that you're going to shake the baby? Okay? Yeah. Your language is slippery. In some sense, you don't cling to it because you have to let go. I think I'm going to be quoting, my favorite quote from the Mumen Kwan in a minute, and if not, I'll stick it in there, addressing this point. Okay, so it's important to say that Nagarjuna's Madhyamika philosophy is not the same as Zen. Much teaching that is essential to Zen is missing from Nagarjuna. For example, Nagarjuna doesn't talk, he does refer to mind, but he doesn't talk about it in the fundamental way that we talk about mind in Zen. What is Buddha? Buddha is mind. What is Buddha? No mind, no Buddha, right? He talks very little about practice. This is a philosophical work. talks very little about practice. Now, you can't write something like this without having a lot of serious practice. This is not, sort of just playing with words. This is coming out of very serious practice, but he doesn't talk about it. He doesn't have any stories. He has a few metaphors, the magician and the kingdom of the Gandharvas or whatever it is. He has a few metaphors here and there, but he doesn't have any stories, which is a major technique in transmitting Zen teaching. And of course, stories are a good way to cut through thinking. They're a good way to not hold on to any ideas. They're a good way to communicate no view, but he doesn't have them. And he never talks about function. How do we function in this world? But he did have a strong influence, and one can even make a credible claim that it is Zen which truly exemplifies certain aspects of Nagarjuna's teaching. So I'm going to have a bunch of comparisons. From the beginning of the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, I prostrate to the perfect Buddha, the best of teachers, who taught that whatever is dependently arisen, i.e. everything, is unceasing, unborn, unannihilated, not permanent, not coming, not going, without distinction, without identity, and free from conceptual construction. And then here's Sosan's Mirror of Zen. There is only one thing from the very beginning, infinitely bright and mysterious by nature. It was never born and it never dies. It cannot be described or given a name. And of course, this thing is no thing. There's intense skepticism about teaching, language, and theories. So from the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, no Dharma was taught by the Buddha at any time, in any place, to any person. From the Linchi record, stated a little strongly, if you meet the Buddha, kill him. From the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, therefore, think about form, but do not construct theories about form. What language expresses is non-existent. The sphere of thought is non-existence. And here's my favorite from the Mumonkan. Words cannot speak truth. Speech cannot point into nature. One who holds words is lost. One who attaches to sentences is dead. So, any questions? Yes.
So what did you read something about, what was your statement about theories? Just now?
Statement, I think I just said skepticism about theories. It wasn't a statement. It was just saying he was very skeptical about these.
Oh, okay. So, but isn't the whole thing, I mean, it's all theoretical, so it's all theories.
Right. So he implicit in this text, and at the end of the text, the end of the text is, which leads to the relinquishing of all views. Don't hold this text. If you have this idea, you have the relative, you have the absolute, they're actually the same thing. Everything is in flux, everything is codependent, nothing has any, inherent existence, blah, 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 then you've lost.
Is that?
So yes, it exactly, if you take it seriously, it turns on itself and you have to leave it behind.
And that's why it gets into my head too much. Because one of my questions is, how do you read this and not it just getting all into your head trying to figure out what the hell he's saying?
Well, first of all, trying to figure out what the hell he's saying is not a bad thing to do. But then when you've done that, with that, you have to ask yourself, what is this pointing to? What is this pointing to? And it's pointing to the relinquishing of all views. It means don't let this run your life,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, dogs do just fine. I don't think they go around wondering about the absolute and the relative. So yeah. Yeah, I mean this whole thing of kind of turning on itself is a very interesting aspect of Nagarjuna, because if you take him really seriously, you have to jettison it. So And meanwhile, the wall behind you is green. Okay? So, let's talk about kongans. So, in some sense, the negation of the four propositions is exactly the fundamental stance of kongans. So, the introduction to the third case, Master Ma is well from the Blue Cliff Record. This way will not do, this way will do, not this way will do too. This is too diffuse. This way won't do, this not this way won't do either. This is too cut off. From the transmission of the lamp, she too responding to Yao Shan's request about realizing true nature. This way won't do, not this way won't do, both this way and not this way won't do either. How about you? I love that. You know. Jojo's dog. Does a dog have Buddha nature? If you say yes, you're wrong. If you say no, you're wrong, right? So this fundamental stance, you know, the negation of the four propositions is a fundamental stance in Kongan practice. And then there's sort of slippage. So given dependent coordination, nothing is fixed, things slide into each other. For example, from the Blue Cliff Record, bring me the rhinoceros fan. The fan is broken. Then bring me the rhinoceros. Right? They just kind of slide into each other. The absolute equals the relative is it's very pervasive in Zen. Shitu's Sandokai, I think we did a class on that. The English titles are all along the line of the identity of the relative and the absolute. That's what that poem is about. And then we have, you know, high-class questions. What is Buddha? And the answer is dry shit on a stick, you know, right? So this identity of the absolute and the relative absolutely permeates Zen. And then this is emphasis on emptiness, common to all Mahayana schools, but Zen emphasizes it more than most. Sometimes it even seems to be a fundamental essence, which Nagarjuna was saying, no, it's not. But sometimes the discussion seems straight out of Nagarjuna. So example, here's from Dawi's Swampland Flowers. Existence cannot be grasped, non-existence cannot be grasped either. Winter's cold and summer's heat cannot be grasped. Inside, outside, and in between cannot be grasped. The one who speaks like this cannot be grasped. The one who hears such talk cannot be grasped either. Not even a fine hair can be grasped. Neither you nor I can be grasped. Ungraspability itself cannot be grasped. Basically, things have no inherent nature. Now, if this had been written in, you know, 4-line stanzas, it could have come straight out of Nagarjuna. And then this notion of the middle way as negating existence and non-existence. Here's a quote from the great Korean teacher Chinol. When the deluded mind is present in existence, it is attached to existence. When it is present in non-existence, it is attached to non-existence. It is constantly caught in one of these two extremes and is never aware of the middle path. So don't get caught in those extremes. Quotation from Sosan's Mirror Zen. It is therefore extremely important that you abandon the view that things do or do not exist. And finally, non-piety. So Zen, meet the Buddha, kill him, right? Zen is not pious at all. And while Nagarjuna situates himself, you know, he's always referring deferentially to the Buddha. Both Nagarjuna and Zen stand outside sutra teaching based on karma. That is, if you do this, you get that. So even though he's deep in a culture which has this notion of karma, he's cutting through karma. So Sosan's Mirror Zen, if you know that the arising thought is itself unreal delusion, you are already free. What need is there for employing skillful means? And also from our precept ceremony, karma has no self-nature. It is created by our mind. When your mind is extinguished, your karma is extinguished. So, okay. Are there any questions? Because I think, gosh, I did that in 39 minutes. I thought it would take me 2 hours. Okay, Shemek.
Yeah, at the beginning you said that according to Nagarjuna, there is no Judy that gets reborn.
No, what?
There is no Judy that gets reborn.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I don't think that's what he says. I
Well,
think that what he says is that it is not wise to say that there is Judy that's not reborn, but it's not wise to say there is no Judy that gets reborn.
That's correct. What Nagarjuna, yes, thank you. What Nagarjuna is saying there is no essential Judy. There's no inherent Judy. And he does
Yeah,
a lot.
but we have to be careful.
Yeah, it's not that there's no Judy. You're right. There is Judy, but that's the conventional Judy, but that there's no inherent absolute Judy. Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, but that doesn't negate the problem of rebirth.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for correcting me.
Yeah, thanks.
Your language is very slippery. Yeah, it's really hard to talk about this and not fall into error. Yeah. Are there any other questions?
I have a question, but I'm not sure how to state it.
Okay.
So let's say you read all this and how does it apply maybe to your like everyday life?
That's a really good question. Thank you for asking it. Yeah. If you believe in essences, these hard things, then you can't have lightness. You can't be flexible. So suppose you have a situation where you and maybe somebody you work with, you don't get along. And we all do this. We build up. This person is not treating me well. I am not being treated well by this person. And you build up this solid thing, this solid mass, and you believe in its reality. And then that distorts everything. And it's not saying that this person is actually treating you well, but it's saying that the way you see what's happening becomes lighter and more flexible. And remember that the point of this is the extirpation of suffering. And it's these attachments to what we think has inherent existence. So what's existing we think is inherent, and that calcifies us, and that causes suffering. And when we're not calcified, then we become open. And then we can not necessarily find a way to change the situation, but the way we live with it is different. And that's not, again, I want to say that's not saying you're not suffering, Like, you threw out your back this morning, right? During bows. And that's not saying, or was it your leg, whatever it was, yeah. And that's not saying that you didn't feel pain in that moment, but how you dealt with that pain. Did you see it as, oh my God, my leg went out, I have this pain, what am I going to do, or did you just simply deal with it? Just simply, and maybe it's still painful and maybe it's not painful, but you're just, that's how we extirpate suffering, is seeing clearly.
Is it experience? I mean, I always think of Zen as being experiential.
Yeah.
focusing on experience. So like I don't remember where I read it once that said there you have a swimmer, you don't have a swimmer and an ocean,
Hmm.
you just have swimming.
Yeah, that's a good metaphor.
So there's no two separate entities. You just have an action
Yeah,
that describes.
yeah. And even describing that action is pinning it down too much, but it's a
Mm.
very good metaphor. Yeah, because with language we have to pin down something. So yeah, that's a very good metaphor. So this whole thing, this whole text, it's, it can live in your head, but if it just lives in your head, it doesn't mean anything. He's pointing, he's directing you, he's directing. How do you see things?
Mhm.
How do you view things? Do you hang on to your view, or is your view open? The relinquishing of all views. That doesn't mean you don't have views. It means you relinquish them. They come up and you relinquish them. So yeah, like I said, to me, in some sense, Zen is instantiating Nagarjuna's philosophy. It's taking it and turning it into experience, or exemplifying it as experience rather than being abstractly philosophical. Does that make sense? Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, when I would go on long retreats, I would take this book with me and I would read it over and over and over again. And if it had been abstract philosophy, I wouldn't have done that. You don't bring Kant or Hume on a meditation retreat. But somehow, in that, he's always pointing, he's always pointing, he's always pointing. Yeah. So thank you.
Judy,
Anything else? Yeah.
are there when you would go on retreats and read some of Nagarjuna, were there certain chapters that you would tend to turn to?
No, I would just go through the whole thing and I would do the same thing with mirrors and I would just start, finish, start and finish, start and finish. Those are the two texts that I would bring with me. Sometimes I bring another text too. I think a couple of times I might have brought Chanel. But yeah, because, yeah, no, if the idea of having a favorite text on a retreat, like, oh, I like this paragraph, but I don't like that, that just seems sort of odd.
It does, but I didn't know if there were certain chapters that maybe hit you more than others.
Everyone would hit me. Yeah, everyone. Like I didn't talk about fire and fuel. I just adore the chapter on fire and fuel. You know. So, but yeah, everyone has its wonderfulness. So thank you. Any other questions?
So we don't know. You said that there's not much that we know about his life.
Mm-hmm.
So does anyone know any students that he had that that followed, or did he have students?
Well, he
Is
certainly had students because he was a teacher. Um, on the lineage chart, someone is assigned as a student, but I don't know if this person was. There certainly were very important commentaries, and the names are all Sanskrit, and I can't pronounce any, but Kandakriti or whatever, maybe Shemek, maybe you know. There's a bunch of very important commentaries on Nagarjuna. I'm not sure how close they are in time to him. I don't imagine that they're that close because, again, we don't know if he's first century or second century. So if we knew of a particular student, we'd probably know when that student was or their next student. And with that kind of vagueness, I'm not sure.
Judy, this has been remarkable so far. I'm really pleased to be here. And you made mention of the fact that there was something that you would be able to share with us. Can you share? Do you have a way to share any of these notes at all?
Yeah, I can just shoot me an email and I'll send it to you. Actually, the notes on Nagarjuna are on our webpage. The only thing that's not on our, oh, you know what? We have time. You want me to talk about my Buddha Dharma article? Okay. So that's also on the website. Let me see what there's anything here. Yeah, let me just read some paragraphs of that. They're sort of saying the same thing, but a little differently. Nagarjuna's method of liberation is threefold. Look carefully at language and thinking, completely deconstructing them so nothing is left. Point to our original mind by exhausting the contradictions of our ordinary thinking mind, and reveal the inherent contradictions we face every time we speak. Every time we try to say something, we are making a big mistake. And this is big in Zen, right? Open your mouth, mistake. Every time we try to say something, we're making a big mistake. We are pointing away from truth. Nagarjuna's method is to analyze things so closely that our discursive thought just vanishes. When, as he says, emptiness is the relinquishing of all views, what are we then left with? So, okay. Then I talk about the tetralemma, which I already have. Okay. And then let me give you the full story from the transmission of the lamp. Yashan comes to Shitu, says, I understand the Buddha's teaching, but I heard around here you all just sit in silence. What does this mean? And that's where Shitu says, this way won't do, not this way won't do, both this way and not this way won't do. How about you? How about you? It's so great. And I should mention that Da Wei's great female Dharma heir, Miao Tsung, awakened when she heard this story. Okay, and then we got the middle way, Mumun. Let me explicate about language a little bit. So Mumun's commentary: words cannot show truth, speech cannot point into nature. One who holds words is dead. One who attaches to sentences is lost. I think I said that slightly wrong a minute ago. So does this seem a little extreme? It's not. Look carefully how any sentences are constructed, and there is always a problem. I am standing here, you are sitting there. By the dictates of English grammar, and every language has its grammatical exigencies, maybe not the same, we've got I, you, standing, sitting, here, there. The specific grammatical demands of Navajo or Bantu might be different, but they are there, guaranteed. So into syntax already is built in the fact that language, we lose our way in language. Grammar necessarily distorts things. Nagarjuna's methodology is to point out the distortions. How can there be a here without a there? How can there be a there without a here? How can we distinguish here from there? Where does here begin? Where does there end? And so on. And I talked about fire and fuel, so let me read that part. Consider, for example, the 10th chapter in the Mula Madhyamaka Karika on fire and fuel. Nagarjuna shows, how many of you love that chapter? How many of you read that chapter? Yeah, okay. Nagarjuna shows that fuel cannot be fire and fire cannot be fuel, but fuel cannot not be fire and fire cannot not be fuel. Fire cannot be dependent on or independent of fuel. Fuel cannot be dependent on or independent of fire. He writes, I don't think that those who teach that the self is the same as or different from the entities understand the meaning of the doctrine. Such seemingly dry logic has profound ethical consequences. This is Nagarjuna insisting on codependent origination or dependent co-origination or interbeing, interpenetration, whatever you want to call it. You can't assert anything because assertions necessarily separate. and things are not separate. It is our actual perception, not intellectual analysis, but direct perception of no separation that truly reveals and necessitates ethical behavior. Nagarjuna's logic invites us past our own ideas and into that direct seeing. So if the boundaries fade, then how can we act unethically? The sort of standard way, because anything I do to you, I'm also doing to me, right? Okay, but that's still making you and me. We have to get past that. Okay, so ethics is just rooted. I love Buddhism because ethics, ontology, epistemology are not separate. They all go around and imply each other, Okay, let's see what else I want to say. Nagarjuna explores his logic in meticulous detail. He uses language to go deep into a substrate that is more fundamental than language or ideas. Everything in the universe, what we know and what we don't know, what we're aware of, what we're not aware of, everything comes together like that, before speech, before thinking. No distinctions, impossible to name, impossible to describe, and yet you cannot call it nothing. Or, as the Mirror of Zen, paraphrasing the Sutra on the Questions of Brahmavisakanti, says, the Buddha did not appear in this world to save sentient beings. Rather, the Buddha appeared in order to liberate this world from the mistaken view that there is life and death and nirvana or salvation. One can make the sense that any koan is designed exactly to help us navigate this middle way, and we already talked about that. Let's see, what else do I have in here? On same page. Oh yeah. So let me see. So there's a couple of koans which refer directly to the 4 propositions and the 100 negations. There's the 25th case of the Mumonkan, where Yangshan goes to see Maitreya. Everyone's seated in meditation. Yangshan is directed to the 3rd seat, very high seat, very important seat. He sits in the 3rd seat, and then an announcement is made. The talk today will be given by the monk of the 3rd seat, which is, the nightmare where you suddenly walk into a room and discover you're being given an exam and you didn't study for it, right? So Yangshan gets up, hits the table with a gavel, and says, the Dharma of the Mahayana goes beyond the 4 propositions and the 100 negations. Listen carefully, listen carefully. This all happens in his dream. And then the 73rd case of the Blue Cliff Record, a monk says to Matsu, I'm not asking you about the 4 propositions and the 100 negations, but please tell me why Bodhidharma came to China. That's very interesting. I'm not asking you about the 4 propositions and the 100 negations, but please tell me, why did Bodhidharma come to China? And then Matsu says, I'm tired today and can't explain it to you. Go ask Shitang. So the monk goes to Shitang, and Shitang says, why didn't you ask Matsu? And the monk says, I did, but he told me to ask you. And Shitang says, I have a headache today, and I can't explain it. Go ask Bai Shang. So the monk goes to Bai Shang and says, I don't have anything to say about this. So the monk goes back to Matsu, tells him the whole story. And Matsu says, Shitang has white hair, and Bai Shang has black hair. It's so great. It's so great, Anyway. So I say going beyond the 4 propositions, 100 negations is exactly what Matsu does when he says Shitang has white hair and Bai Shang has black hair. But he already did it when he said, I'm too tired. And then, let's see, and then Shitang already went beyond when he said, I have a headache, right? And Bai Shang said, I don't have anything to talk to you about. They've already gone beyond the 4 propositions, the 100 negations. Okay. All right. And then I talk about how much I love this text. Okay. Let me just read the end of it because this sort of answers questions that people have asked. When obsessions, fears, distractions take over, to be reminded that is not is not, is and is not, not is not. This is liberation. This is the way out of the hells we so easily fall into. Oh, it isn't like that. So whatever it isn't like that. And when you think it's something else, it isn't that either. Then, like Matsu, we can see that Shitang has white hair and Bajang has black hair. We know when to step forward, we know when to step backward. We know when to reach out a hand and how to use it. Subject and object no longer blind us. The interpenetration of all things becomes completely ordinary. Everyone has moments like this, and then everyone forgets. Nagarjuna reminds us, with all his negations, oh, yes, this. So that's a Buddha Dharma article. So I've sort of said the same thing at least 3 or 4 times. Are there any other questions? Okay, so like I said, the notes are available on our resource page, both the notes and my Buddha Dharma article, complete with the terrible title and the horrible illustrations of a woman writing mathematics on a blackboard. They call the title "It Will Never Add Up." Hi, Carol.
I am sorry, I got here late. Where's the resource page in the notes?
Well, let's stop the
Okay, the recording. Sorry.
recording.
Thank you. Sorry.